Hello everybody, welcome back to Papa's Saw Shop. I'm Papa, and today I'm going to answer a question that I've had recently. We get these, well, let me grab the box here, just so you see. So we get these clone saws in, and I tell everybody, there's a clone saw, and then there's a duplicate saw. And I prefer to call our saws a duplicate saw. Now this is not to be confused. This is not to be confused with the old Goat series, because we do a lot of our own parts on the old Goat series. We do some aftermarket parts, and we do some. So those are a little different monster, because those are built for, just like the advertising says, for power and durability. This is just basically, we're just building this thing. Now, I'm going to throw that box over here. We don't need that damn thing. Okay, so I'm just going to, the question I've had is that, again, I don't like to call these clone saws, and I'll tell you why in a second. But people will say, what's different about the clone saws that you build and regular clone saw? So first of all, let me get you flipped around here like I always do. On here, you're gonna see just nothing but glitter, and then we'll get you still going. All right. Okay. So so very simple. I'll kind of show you some of the stuff that I always do this when I put these things together. I always, if you're going to build one of these, and I recommend that you don't, but if you're going to build one, you want to do something like this. You want to get, this part doesn't go good obviously, but you want to get all your parts out of the bags. And when I say bags, I mean bags. I mean they put in, well, I think I just threw it away, but I'll bet there's 300 bags to this stupid thing. Everything in here is in a bag. So, what's a clone saw? What's a duplicate saw? Okay, well, a duplicate saw is, if you have and let's be honest, these are modeled after a Steel 200. So let's say you have a brand new, which is, you can't get anymore, but let's just say you had a brand new Steel MS200 sitting right here, and you wanted to copy that saw. All right, well, a copy is not the original. A copy is a copy, the original is the original. All right, and then there's a clone saw. Okay, so a clone saw would be where you take whatever you can, the cheapest place that you can get it from, and just build yourself a saw. Okay, so in that respect, I'm going to get you turned around here. In that respect, that's kind of the difference between a clone saw and a duplicate saw. So you saw all the parts here, and you've seen this right here that was on the counter. Now this is pretty much what separates the men from the boys and the girls from the women. Okay, all of this stuff in here, I put them up here in these little boxes that I got up on my wall. They end up in here, and so I'll take all this crap out of this bag, and what these are is, these are all the screws and all the, and by the way, if for whatever reason I have a name brand saw in here, and I won't mention no names, but a lot of it is yellow or orange. I don't make a yellow saw much anymore. But again, I won't mention no names, but their saws are orange. I take their screws out of the case as well, because I have broken many a steel screws that look like this. The reason they look all shiny like that is not because they're new, it's because they're aluminum. And when you tighten them up, you can snap them off. If they have if you tighten it up and then you use the saw and the saw tweaks a little bit, it might break off. So I put real screws in it. There was a day that Stihl used actual good screws. So that leads me to my next point, a duplicate saw. Now, this screw right here, and I put this up here on my bench just to show you, that is a Stihl air housing screw. This, I'm going to pick this one right up out of the Holst Farmer Tech, whatever you want to call it. That's the Farmer Tech. Boy, they look exactly the same. You know what? Because they are. I put these damn things in the vise, put my little pressure tester on it, see how much pressure these things will take. You know what? They take the exact amount of pressure. And I'm reciting from memory here, but I want to say it's somewhere about 3 psi. You know, not bad, I guess, considering that I'm bending it this way and you tighten it in this way. So, you know, que sera, sera. So, anyway, I'll put that up there so we don't get them mixed up. So anyway, those screws we use with, I buy old Stihl saws all the time, and and a lot of them, you know, we just sell them for parts. But what I want out of those old Stihl saws is the screws. Those are solid, good screws back when they made them, back when they knew what they were doing. They weren't trying to cut corners and save pennies. So anyway, a duplicate saw, you never open that bag. Throw that away. If you've seen my other videos, you already know we don't do that kind of stuff around here. So what we do, grab a handful of these. We use, see if I can get you up here with the camera. That's the ones we use right there. And if you know anything about Stihl screws or whatnot, there you can see them. You know that's more what they look like. Now, yeah, these are dirty, all that kind of stuff, but you can tell when you look at these from an old saw and you look at the ones out of a new saw, they're entirely different. They're no comparison whatsoever. So let's move on. Now, I'm not going to build this thing in front of you here because it takes me about, I'd say about an hour or so to build this thing. But I am going to kind of go over a couple of things. Okay. So first of all, if you buy this kit in that box and you sit in your garage one night and you take all the parts out of that box and you put it all together, that's a clone saw. Okay. Now, if you've been doing this for a number of years and you know, I'm trying to straighten up my hat here, looks like it's crooked on the camera. Well, I'm so vain, aren't I? But if you've been doing this for a number of years and you know that those little aluminum screws are not going to work out, and you know that this chintzy little thing is not going to do, then you know to throw that thing out and not use it. You use something else. And so you also know, if you've been around the block a little bit like I have, you know that there's one major thing. There's one major difference. And I'm going to have a video here pretty soon. It's not going to be today, but for all you guys that love math, I'm going to give you a little math about how they make these parts and how they, all that kind of stuff, and where the numbers are when they make all this stuff. But anyway, the number one difference between OEM and aftermarket is the quality control. Okay, so you're gonna have things that I'm impressed here. I was going to say this is plastic, but they've upgraded this. This is rubber, so that's kind of cool. But let's see if I can find some. Oh, there you go. So you're going to have these little bumper stops, you know, they just look chintzy, you know. That does it matter? Not really. But I'll tell you what does matter. And let me find. Oh, I got a long screw here I can use for a pointer. This right here. Where this right there, I'll turn so you can see it. Where this clips into the plastic. And let me grab a piece of plastic here. All right. Now, how abrasive this is going to be, oranges and apples, you know. This probably isn't made to OEM specs. I don't give a damn, you know. A chain is just going to rub against this thing, and if you keep your chain tight, it's not going to rub against it a lot anyway. What I am concerned about, though, I'm concerned about how it fits in that hole. Okay, now, this one seems to fit pretty tight today. What about tomorrow? What about when this thing gets pulled off and put back on, pulled off? What about when the owner of the saw cleans it? Well, you know, whatever. So, again, you're making a clone saw, you pop this thing in there, you call it a day. You're making a duplicate saw, you make sure that doesn't come out. Now, at the OEM factory, I'm pretty sure that on every part, somebody inspected this thing, and some bean counter got down there with a gauge and they said, okay, exactly what does that have to be to make sure that this thing doesn't come out, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Now, I'm pretty sure at the aftermarket factory, they said, looks good. If they did that much. More than likely, it probably came off of some kind of a 3D printing line, and it went right down and got dumped into a box, and nobody even looked at it. So, what I do is I put a little silicone just right on the edge. Not a whole lot, because sometimes you're going to have to take this thing off. It's going to wear out. But I put a little silicone on there. That's my quality control. Duplicate saw, not a clone. Clone, you don't do that. Okay? All right, now, let's get out a couple other things. Oh, I wanted to show you this. All right, now, I want to show you this guy right here. Now, if you've been around a saw, you know what this guy is, right here. That's a vacuum boot, okay? And I'm not going to explain where it goes. If you want a video or something on a vacuum boot, you tell me down there, and I'll be more than happy to make another video on vacuum boots and the vacuum of a chainsaw and how it works and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll do that later, but not today. Okay, so this is a vacuum boot. As I'm taking this stuff out of the bag and I'm looking at everything, first of all, I want to make sure that that tab is right there. See that little tab right there? I want to make sure that's there. Now, why do I want to make sure that's there? Because when this thing gets formed, and I don't know exactly the manufacturing process of this, but I do know if you look real close, you see that crease right there? I do know that this sits somehow into a mold, and then they pull the mold apart. So right there where that tab is, that's at the mold. If that tab is not there, you may not even look twice. But if that tab's not there, when that mold came apart, it tore. Now watch this. I'm going to show you this right here in the camera. Watch this. This is cool. Now if you grab that with your fingernail right there on that tab, I'm going to get up here close to the camera. You see that? You see how it bends that crease right there? Now what I've found is that if that tab isn't there and it got torn, when they pulled it out of the mold, it tore the top of the boot. Now, this sets down onto the cylinder, okay? Onto the cylinder head. All right, so if it's got a little tear right there, you go, oh, it's not a big deal. There's a piece that goes over that, clamps it down. Well, it is a big deal because just this last week, I had a guy that brought a clone saw in. He built it himself, and it was a true clone saw. Built it himself, and he mentioned that. And I told him, I said, sounds to me like I got a vacuum leak. And I said, well, when you put that boot on there, do you remember if it had a tab on it? He said, I don't think it did. I remember putting it together. The saw wasn't very old. And sure enough, that's what it was. That tab had just a little notch out of it, and then it just tore it all the way up it. So that tab is pretty important. So that's your quality control right there. Now, the other thing is, I'm going to show you something really cool. When I took this thing out of the bag, well, actually, it was like this. Okay, looked like that. Looked like that. Like that. See anything wrong? Here, I'll get the flashlight. Take a closer look. What in tarnation is that? What is that in there? I have no idea. So, I get out my little pointer. Any idea what that is? That's what came out of here. You see through it now. That's what came out of there. I have no idea what the heck that is. But yeah, it was inside there. So, quality control. Number one, there is no quality control when it comes to this. You are the quality control. Whether you're building a duplicate saw or a clone saw, got to do your quality control. All right. So this is one reason why you open up all those bags and you separate everything into little compartments so you can really get in here and really look at everything. Okay. Now, I've heard some complaints about these little guys right here. You may or may not know what this is, but basically, when you pull your brake back, when you pull your chain brake back, this is what helps keep everything in its place. And when this breaks, what'll happen is it gets a little crack right across here. And so, and I've heard a lot of complaints, you know, that make sure you put in an OEM one of these because, you know, they're just not made from the same metal. BS. I've taken them out of OEM and aftermarket. I can tell you this much, they have perfected these. They used to not be, I mean, you could literally just snap with your finger. But yeah, you're not snapping that thing now. It's pretty sturdy. So there's a lot of stuff in here that just, you know, don't worry about it. Now, while I'm looking at stuff, I'll tell you another little story. So there's not many people around here that'll work on everything like we do here, and so we get a lot of clone saws. I just brought in McCulloughs and Echoes, and I mean some old ancient stuff. So anyway, another different guy brought me in a clone, 200, and he said he watched one of my videos. He put some decent screws in it. Well, he said, you know, I just didn't like how cheap the handle felt, so I put a different handle on it. So, all right, well, let's see what the saw's doing. I kid you not, friends and neighbors, he went to crank that thing one time and he broke the handle straight in half. Just right here, where they always do, broke that handle right there. I said, doggone it, that's an OEM handle. He said, yeah, not very old either. Wish I could take it back. I wish you could too. You know, that sucks. But anyway, I digress. But we have a process when we build the old goat saws. We have a process that we run these through, and it makes them. You see this little flex right here? So when we build, if I was going to build an HP series out of this saw, one of the things that we would do is we would run this through what we call the boiler. And so the boiler puts a I don't want to let too much out of the bag here because it's kind of a private thing we do on it. But basically, there's a polymer film that we put on this, and we heat these things up. To like, I want to say if it was 5 degrees more, they would melt. This stuff is hot, and even when we pull them out of there, we pull them out with tongs, and we pull them out, we set them down, and you cannot pick this thing up, not even with your fingers. Just fingertips. They're hot. But we put like a polymer coating that just melts into it, that just becomes part of it. And so what that does is that it makes stuff like this not, if I were to bend that anymore, I'd snap it. And it doesn't make ours completely indestructible, but it does give stuff like this a whole lot more bend. And so you don't get that brittleness out of here. And I tell people, imagine taking a slice of peanut brittle and then putting silicone over the top of it, laying it real thick, and then just drop that peanut brittle and see if it'll shatter all over the floor. It won't. So, and it's kind of same basic principle, but of course it's not silicone that we put on here because that would peel off. So, but anyway, back to quality control. Make sure that this isn't broken off. Make sure your plastics look all good. Don't sell these plastics short. There's nothing wrong with them, seriously. Now, while I'm talking about plastics, these on the other hand, if you have an OEM, the brake handle, they need to perfect these guys, because they got a long way to go yet before they perfect these. On our duplicate saws, we put these on here, just because we sell them so doggone cheap that I put these together in my spare time. I don't make any labor on them, but anyway, yeah, on the HP series saw, we run these through the boiler, and then they're pretty much tough as nails. You can bend this stuff all over. It's like playing with a Stretch Armstrong. These things will just twist and bend. And, so they're sturdy when it gets to heat and all that kind of stuff, but they're just not as brittle. I'd be afraid of dropping this on a concrete floor, but ours, I'd drop it from the rooftop. I don't care. But anyway, so there's that. Now, on to heart of the engine, this guy here, and I'm going to try and do this so you can see it. And I've had a few videos, at least a couple, on checking these things out on these cylinder heads. I don't know the chemical makeup of what they put into these, but I do know that these are, see, they come like that. They're together when they come in. These are, they seem a bit lighter than the OEM. So generally what I do is I put a coating. Now here, Steel used to put this thing in their old saws. Now they don't do it. This is a really good idea. Okay, I didn't like it at first, just because let me back up. I don't like the way Steel did it. Okay, now what Steel did is they had a stud that went right in here, and then they had this plastic stuff that stuck onto that stud. And there was really no way of taking that thing off in one piece. If you took a saw off, and inevitably it would crack, and then you had pieces of that stuff all over in there. And the other thing was, it was flat. This one here's got holes in it. Okay, so you can say, okay, well, you're picking at straws. Well, kind of, but there's the oil tank, friends. There's not a whole lot of room in there. If you completely block this off, this is not the oil tank anymore. It's just this. So these, once, you know, I've taken a lot of, I stutter when I say this because I don't know if I should say this or not, but I will. I've taken a lot of those out, and the old 200s, just because guys will say, well, I run out of oil quick. You know, well, if they're cutting hardwood or some damn thing and they crank up the oiler, oh yeah, you're going to run out of oil before you even run out half a tank of fuel. So the first thing is you just separate that thing out, you peel that dumb thing out of it. Now, on these guys, because this has holes in it, on the back side of this is concave, okay? So that's pretty sturdy. So it's a pretty sturdy case with that in there. Now, on the HP series saws, and I think we went over this in a video before, but on the HP series saws, it gets a coating all the way through this interior. We pull this out of here because that gets in the way. We pull that out, and then we put this durable coating in there. And I mean, I've tested this thing in my house. It dropped this thing off the roof onto the driveway and it laughs at it. So, but on just the duplicate saws that we build, I just leave that in there and just put it together. This is not going to be an arborist saw by any means. It's not going to be a professional saw. It's just a farmer that uses it and needs a good top handle saw. So I got the camera sitting up against the cylinder head, so I'm going to have to move you a little bit so I can get the cylinder head. Now, lastly, when you, I want to show you one more thing. We'll do it on this here because I got the other half of the case holding this up. But this right here, when you put the other half on here, you always want to make sure that those two match. Okay. Now, when I build these, and I tell you what, I'm just going to move this just so I can show you, because this is kind of important actually. This is a big deal. So when you put these together like that, I'll show you here. This one's pretty good. It matches up pretty close. Okay, but when I rub my finger across here, I kind of feel like a hill right there. It kind of feels like a little bit of a bump. And so I've got a little tiny straight edge that I put up against this thing, and I measure this whole thing, and I make sure that this is completely flat. And then if I don't, I get a little tiny sander I get in there, and I kind of just sand it down and make it even. Now, something that a lot of guys don't do, and I strongly disagree with this, but a lot of guys do not use the cylinder head gasket. You're not going to find any of my saws without a cylinder head gasket. I'm a firm believer in a cylinder head gasket. First of all, if you're dumping that cylinder head gasket because you want a little bit more travel with the piston and try to get a little bit more compression, oh, for crying out loud, look at that. I'm not going to take it out of the bag because I don't want to get it dirty, but you know, you're not going to get that much compression out of that. You know, come on. So anyway, when this is up there, this is going to go up as high as it's going to go up. You're not going to change the height of that. I don't care if you get a cylinder head gasket or not. What you're going to do, you're going to build up heat in between that cylinder head and here. Pretty soon it's going to leak. So again, back to these duplicates. Quality control. Okay. I make sure that this is flat, and then put my silicone, just a really, really thin coating on here. I just want it just enough to make it stick. It's not making me a gasket. I just want it enough so that this doesn't move or wrinkle or crinkle or do any kind of crazy thing when I put the cylinder head on. Never had one happen, but I make sure it's done anyway. But it gives an extra coating just in case there is a bump or an imperfection or something in there. Because again, there's no quality control. And I can put my straight edge up there and I can say, oh, yeah, it looks good. Well, I'm not a scientist, and whatever kind of a person it would be that measures that kind of stuff, well, I'm not him. So I just make doggone sure that that is not going to leak on my watch. So I put silicone under the gasket, put the gasket on, let that silicone dry, and then I put a little bit on the cylinder head itself. And again, very, very tiny parts, just a light film. And the reason I stress that is because one time at band camp, I put one of these together, and I put a little bit too much on there, and the saw ran for, 3 seconds, and the silicone streaked its way up on the side of the piston, heated up, melted, and stuck everything in place. So, yeah, Papa makes mistakes too. So yeah, there's that. So be mindful of that little mistake you can easily make. All right. So we're going to lean this up here against this. I'm just about done talking your ear off here. I just want to show you the cylinder head. Now you're going to find the rings inside there. Now, on a clone saw, duplicate saw, on the duplicate saws that we build, I use the original rings. On the HP series saws, these rings will not do it. They just have, we up the compression on it, we up the vacuum on it, and those rings just snap. They just can't handle it. I don't know what these rings are made out of, but we do caber rings. We use caber rings on the old goat saws. I'm pretty sure that this used to be a roll. Well, I was going to say a roll of wire, but I don't think so. It was probably maybe a pipe at one point. I would guess this was a pipe, and then they have a machine that just slices it in little pieces and then comes along and slices the edge of it. I don't know, but they're really, really brittle. Alrighty, your piston is going to be inside there. Be careful you don't lose that little red bag. Got your circlips in there. By the way, I don't use those circlips ever. Throw those out with the screws, because these guys have these little tabs on them, which makes it easier to put in. I'll just show you up there. See those little tabs on there? Makes it really easy to put in there. Problem is, I will build my own circlip before I use these, because the tabs can get bent when they get hot, or they can also break, and they're just floating around inside there until they finally come out and booger up everything. So yeah, circlips on these are not good. You always want to, and I'm looking at this one just because I haven't had we're looking at it together. You always want to look down inside here. Now that one looks pretty good. I built one of these a couple years ago, and I'm going to put this piston down here, and I'll get my little screwdriver, my little pointer here. But I built one of these a couple years ago, and it had like a little dimple right here, just right on that port there, on the exhaust port. And so I got in there and I sanded her down a little bit, and I honed the cylinder, and it should be good. Now, if there's any damage whatsoever in that cylinder, get a different cylinder, okay? Because what I learned from that is that if it's damage on the front where you can see it, it's damaged all the way through. It's an air pocket or something when they cast this thing, and that whatever that is, that air pocket or bubbling of material or whatever it is, it's all the way through the metal. You just can't see it. So if you see any imperfections whatsoever in here, if you're putting one of these together, don't use it. It's not gonna make it. I mean, not even in the short run. You're not gonna cut any wood with it, so don't try it. Um, so again, like I said, I'd silicone the top of this with a light film of silicone, um, and then this gets measured as well to make sure that this is a flat surface. Last but not least, you get the crankshaft, and now I'm going to tell this to anybody who will listen. If you're building a saw, here is something that people do not do. People never do this when they're building a saw, and I don't know why. Now I keep an old, the outside of this looks pretty nasty, but the inside of this stuff, this is what I call clear purified oil. This stuff is like, I have a little, like a very, very small screen that my oil goes through, and I put 2 cycle, and I put some 90 weight, and I put some 30 weight, and it ends up being this slimy stuff, and it's got a little transmission fluid in there too for a solvent. Okay, but this right here, okay, and I don't know if you noticed, but down here in this big container, I got my bearings. All the bearings that are going in this thing are sitting down here in a puddle of oil. They're just soaking in that oil. I want them to be just as oiled up as I can get them. Now, before I go putting this into a saw, first of all, I make sure that the bearings all look good in there, which they do. And then I just dump some of my special little oil in there. Now, that's not going to be the last dose of oil that this thing gets from me, because I can't see in here. All right? So I don't know if it's thoroughly oiled or not, but I'm going to make damn sure it is before I put it all together. All right, so let's wind this thing up. Oh, I want to show you one more thing. Quality control. So here's a flywheel, and we've talked, if you've seen my videos, we've talked a lot about flywheels, and I'm not going to talk a lot about this flywheel, but I will mention the quality control, because I picked this thing up out of the box, and I said, oh shoot, I'm going to show this to the folks. I have not touched this except take it out of the box and set it on the shelf. Look at here. What is that? I don't know. Let's take it off and see. Take it off together. It's coming right off. It's just a piece. I suspect it came off of there. See that? That's about the right size. And this looks good. Alright, but if I hadn't have taken all this out of the box, let it all just kind of sit here and air out and whatever, this might have gotten tossed into something, and boy, that would cause a bunch of damage. That's some kind of an aluminum. Yeah, it snaps as easy as those screws. Something to be said for that. But anyway, make sure that your flywheel looks good. It's not cracked, nothing like that. Yeah. And then make sure all your plastics are there. I got all the plastics laid out here. Not really a whole lot to say about those, but so anyway, the moral of this video that I want to put across is that a lot of people have asked me, what's the difference between a clone saw and your duplicate 200 saw? And we list them as a clone saw, and that's going to change. I'm going to go in there and change that. But the difference is a clone saw is a saw that you dug it all out of this box, you laid it all out, and you put all those pieces together and you made yourself a saw. That's a clone saw. A duplicate saw is when you take those pieces out, you throw away the junk stuff, you put in stuff that you know is going to work and that's going to last, and you feel confident about using it. And you're not saying, well, you know, it'll hold up for a few months and then I'll buy a good one. No, this is going to be a good one. It's a duplicate, and it's just not going to have the OEM markings on it. It's not going to have OEM stuff, but it'll have a lot of OEM stuff in it. So, clone saw, built cheap, with cheap parts. Duplicate saw, cheap parts, built by a professional, built with OEM, or at least sturdier than cheap parts. So anyway, I hope that answers all your questions. Hope you learned something. I got 40 minutes into this doggone thing, so I need to just get to work here and shut up. And be safe out there. Till next time, happy motoring.